What we want to discuss tonight is a theory, an idea that's become more and more popular in recent years, which is that we are living in, we are living in a simulation. That this world isn't real as we think, but it's just a big virtual reality game that we are in. It might seem like this is completely crazy, and it might seem like this can't have anything to do with the Torah. Surely it has nothing to do with Judaism, with God, with Torah. Like, this can't be real, right? This has to be some like far-fetched idea, sci-fi, 21st century sci-fi idea by people who've watched too many movies, played too many video games. Can't be real, right? But actually, when you think about it a little bit, it starts to make more and more sense. And one could argue that actually the Torah has been saying the same thing for millennia. First, we'll look at the evidence, and then we'll see if it makes sense. Does it fit with Torah, and what could we actually practically draw from it? It'll explain a lot of things, a lot of mysteries, a lot of things that we've discussed in recent months. I think you'll see how it kind of, in a way, it brings everything together. So it's a nice way to actually conclude our session of recent classes, because we're going on break for a few weeks, and there won't be another class until, God willing, July 31st. So you'll have a long time to think about this. Okay, the idea isn't new. The idea that this world isn't real isn't new. And really, our sages already spoke about this. They described our world as alma deshikra, as a world of lies. The other world, the afterlife, is the olam ha'emet, is the world of truth. And this world isn't the world, this is the world of lies. The ancient Greeks also really spoke about this. It's related to, if you remember, Plato's allegory of the cave, of most people are just kind of seeing shadows on a wall. People aren't seeing the real world, they're just seeing shadows on a wall, and it takes a real philosopher to break free from those shackles of being tied down in a cave and just seeing shadows and not seeing the real world for what it actually is. And only the select few intellectuals, the philosophers, really know the truth, and see the world for what it is. So it's even related to that. It goes back many, many centuries. We've spoken about The Matrix before. When that movie came out, this simulation theory idea was resurrected a little bit in pop culture. We gave the class on The Matrix and Judaism before. That was more of like seeing the simulation idea as a metaphor. But what if it's actually real? What if we are in a matrix? And how would you know that when you're dreaming, right? Your dreams are so real. When you are dreaming, it feels like you are awake. Typically you don't know you're dreaming. It's so real. So what if your whole life right now is a dream? How would you know? How would you know the difference between the real world and an illusory world if everything is just really in your brain, right? Everything you see and hear and touch and taste, it's all just electrical signals in your brain. That's all it is. No different than the electrical signals in a computer. And in the last couple of years with artificial intelligence, this idea has gotten more popular because now we're seeing machines so powerful that they can generate entire worlds that are super realistic. If you've seen some of this AI stuff that's coming out now, you can't tell the difference between a real video and an AI-generated video. Even YouTube has a thing now. This is recent. In the last few months, they added this. Whenever I upload a video to YouTube, there's actually a section there that says, are you using AI to simulate real-life things in your video? Like, you actually have to tell them if what you are posting is fake, because people can't tell the difference. And they'll put a little warning that, like, this has AI simulated images. So it's a little bit frightening, right? AI is able to create entire worlds, can generate people's faces, can generate your voice, right? AI could hear a short snippet of your voice and recreate whatever. Yeah? You could be saying something that you never said, but it'll sound exactly like you. So with artificial intelligence and with recent advances in virtual reality technology, you might have seen all these new VR headsets, and Facebook is creating a whole virtual metaverse, whole virtual world. It's becoming more and more and more realistic. So at what point might we say that what if we're already in a super realistic virtual reality game? Is that possible? So what would be the evidence for that? Do we have evidence to support this notion that this world isn't real, that it's all just a simulation, it's virtual? We do. I think we have concrete scientific evidence that this is in fact the case. And we get that from quantum physics, right? Starting in the late 1800s and going into the 1900s, scientists, physicists were looking closer and closer into the atom. And they soon discovered that most of the atom isn't an atom. It has no actual concrete material form. It's mostly empty space, right? Over 99.99% of the atom is empty space. The typical analogy is that if an atom was like the Rogers Center or like a major baseball stadium, then the nucleus that has mass would just be like a baseball sitting at center field. That's it. And then you have some electrons whizzing around where the stands are, in the seating area, and that's it. But the whole thing is really empty. It's over 99% empty space. And the part that's not empty space, that part that we say actually has some kind of mass, those particles, like electrons, which have very little mass, but even bigger particles, we say that they have this wave-particle duality. Sometimes they behave like solid concrete particles, and sometimes they seem to behave like really just waves of potential. It's almost like they're not really there unless somebody is measuring them. They seem to be there when we measure them, when we observe them, and when we don't, it's almost like this wave of probabilities where they might be or might not be. It's almost like they're only there when we're watching them. So that's called the observer effect. Some people call it the observer effect. There's a great documentary on this by Jim Al-Khalili, for those who know Jim Al-Khalili, the British physicist and BBC guy, and he has a two-part series on quantum physics where he actually shows, it's worth watching because he actually shows the experimental apparatus of how we do these wave-particle duality experiments and how we actually show that a particle can behave. It can be a wave sometimes, it can be a particle sometimes. It's nice to see, in an actual lab, how they do these experiments, and he shows it. And at the beginning of the documentary, he poses a question, is the moon there if nobody's looking at it? And his conclusion at the end is, it seems like if nobody's looking at the moon, it's not actually there. It only comes into existence when somebody is observing it. And that's why, the fathers of quantum physics, the early giants who worked on this, the kinds of things that they said, Niels Bohr said, if quantum physics hasn't profoundly shocked you, you haven't understood it. Right? And Albert Einstein didn't like quantum physics. Actually, most of them didn't like quantum physics. Erwin Schrödinger, who's called also the father of quantum physics, he said it's totally crazy, and I quote, he said, "I'm sorry I ever had anything to do with it." And Albert Einstein didn't like it. Albert Einstein called Niels Bohr a Talmudist. It's a Talmudical philosophy. Albert Einstein said quantum physics is Talmudical, where two things can be true simultaneously, or neither can be true, or both can be true, or one or the other. And it's like you have multiple realities. It doesn't seem to make sense on the surface level. But that's what science has discovered. Our minds seem to make things real. So Wolfgang Pauli, who's one of these early quantum physicists, he said that modern particle physics turns the observer once again into a little lord of creation. In his microcosm, with the ability at least partially of freedom of choice and fundamentally uncontrollable effects on that which is being observed. So he won a Nobel Prize for physics too, like a lot of these people did. And so he's saying that, you're like a little lord of creation. What you observe comes into existence, and you have an actual effect on the world that you are observing. It's a pretty mind-boggling thing. If you bring in simulation theory, that actually explains it perfectly, because everybody's baffled by quantum physics. How is it that particles seem to be empty? How is it that particles seem to only come into a solid existence when we observe them? How is it that it seems like the moon's not there when we're not looking at it? How do you explain that? If you're in a simulation, you can explain that perfectly. Because if you know anything about simulated worlds and video games, we've probably all played a video game at some point in our life. The way a video game works is the computer that's generating, whatever the engine is, the game console that's generating the images on your screen, it's only generating what you need to see at that moment that you're playing that game at that particular stage in the game. Right? Like the programmers built an entire world into that game cartridge or whatever, into the file, into the program. There's a whole world there, right? We all played Super Mario. There's like hundreds of levels and worlds, right? You go from one world to the next. Each one has many stages. But when you're playing the game console is not generating all those worlds into existence. That would be very inefficient. It would drain your battery super fast. You'd need a super, very, very big computer to run a game like that. So what is the game console doing? It's only rendering the part that you're on right now. If you're Mario, you're only seeing on the screen what Mario is seeing, that stage of the game. The rest of the world is basically not being generated by the machine, right? It's not necessary. It's dormant right now. The game console only generates what you need to see right now, what's in front of you, right? And everything else is just there in potential. And when you get there, the computer generates those images. You get what I mean? Yeah. This is the same thing that's quantum physics is telling us about the world around us. Things are only there when you're observing them. When you get to your house, the computer is generating the images that you expect to be in your house. Your couch should be there, and the way that it's been programmed to be in your house. But when nobody's home, what's the point for the computer to generate all those images? So it's just sitting, it's there in potential, right? But it needs an observer to come and actually see it and measure it. Now it's real, now it's there.
Camera there. You're not there.
Fine. That's fine. You're observing it. You're measuring it. That is an observation device. So simulation theory beautifully answers it, right? It's the perfect analogy. Just like a computer game works, just like a video game works, that you're only rendering what the character what the player needs to see at the moment. It seems to be that life is actually the same. From a scientific perspective, it's like what's being generated is what you, the player, is observing right now. Another thing that simulation theory can solve is another big puzzle in science and in Torah that I've mentioned many times, which is, why is the universe so perfectly mathematical? Why could everything be described with a formula? Why are there all these exact constants in nature and in the cosmos? It doesn't have to be this way. It's one of the major problems in the philosophy of science. A big question. Why is the universe so perfectly mathematical? Why can I describe everything with formulas, with mathematical formulas, with different strings of code, essentially? And the same is true we said about Torah. Why is the Torah so perfectly mathematical? We've seen many exact gematria, right? Jewish numerology. Why is it that the Torah has this perfect numerological harmony? It's incredible. And there's a connection between the two of them. We've said how in science, you have these incredible constants, and when you if you take one of these constants and change them even by one fraction, the universe would basically cease to exist. Everything is in perfect synchrony. Everything in the cosmos is in perfect synchrony. One of those constants is the fine structure constant, which we mentioned many times before. It's usually given as 137. It's really the inverse of 137. But this is this perfect, dimensionless, unitless constant without which the whole universe wouldn't exist. It basically, in short, represents the relationship between photons and electrons and things, between light and matter. And without this fine structure constant, this 137, the universe wouldn't exist. Richard Feynman, another great physicist, says that every good physicist should have this number on their wall and think about it all the time. And what's amazing is 137 is the gematria of Kabbalah. And Kabbalah is precisely that aspect of Judaism that's all about the secrets of the Torah, the mysticism, how light becomes matter, where creation came from, what is the origins of the universe. That whole field of study in Judaism is called precisely Kabbalah, and the numerical value of Kabbalah is 137. How is that possible? The scientists themselves knew this. Sommerfeld, Wolfgang Pauli, Carl Jung, they knew this. They knew that Kabbalah is 137, that one of the most important numbers in Judaism and in Kabbalah in particular, in Jewish mysticism, is 137. And it also happens to be one of the most important numbers in science. When these scientists figured this out, they couldn't believe it. And Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung went on they had this crazy obsession with this number, and there's a book about it. I've mentioned the book before. The name of the book is 137. And it's all about Wolfgang Pauli and Carl Jung's obsession with this number 137. And how is there this incredible correspondence between ancient Jewish mysticism and modern particle physics? How is this possible? Why is the universe so perfectly mathematically precise?
But that's what makes us believe in God.
Fine, yes. Until now, we've always said, well, that just proves the Torah is divine. Absolutely. But it also proves that we could be in a simulation. And in a simulation, we would expect everything to be perfectly mathematically precise. Right? Because everything is really encoded. Everything is formulas and equations and codes. So in a world that's a simulation, yes, everything would be perfectly mathematically precise. It's all zeros and ones and numbers. It's digital. We're in a digital universe, so you expect everything to be described with digits. Yes?
Math is the queen of the sciences, and Hashem likes to play through mathematical equations.
That's right.
So I feel like quantum physics and math are in between this world and Hashem's world.
Absolutely.
That's the communication
That's right.
system.
There's another book, it reminds me of another book called The Language God Talks. It's a book by Herman Wouk, who's an Orthodox Jew, and his conversations with Richard Feynman, who is this famous physicist. And it's like Richard Feynman was going to teach Herman Wouk a little bit of calculus, and Herman Wouk was going to teach Richard a little bit about Torah, and that was there. It's like a series of their conversations. But like the theme of the book is that calculus is the language that God talks. It's this universal language. Math is this universal language. The whole universe is encoded with math. And even crazier than that is there's actually another famous scientist and physicist and researcher, maybe you've heard of him, his name is Sylvester James Gates, actually claims that he finds within the universe actual computer code. The same codes that we put into computer programs and like web browsers, various error correcting codes and things like that, he claims that he has found the same codes in our universe, in the formulas and equations that govern our universe. Pretty amazing. So you can look up his work as well.
What is that 137? Can you explain that?
137 in science?
Yeah.
It's the fine structure constants, basically how do you generate matter? The universe began with this Big Bang, just energy. No, it began with the Big Bang. But there's it's a scientific fact. And it's a Torah fact. You should listen to that class. So how does energy become matter? Yeah, but how did he do it?
What?
How did he do it?
By speaking.
Yes, and what did he said, let there be light, and what happened?
And that's why-
And there was a Big Bang. Yeah.
You said that. The Torah doesn't say that.
Sure it does. Actually, it says exactly that. The Zohar says exactly that. That's why it's called Sefer HaZohar. It says, "Deit pashtuta de nikuda chada di Zohar," from the expansion of the point of light. It's exactly the same language. Literally. Exactly the same words as a scientist would say. So yes, it started with a Big Bang. It's a scientific fact, and it's a Torah fact. So
It's not a scientific fact.
it is a scientific fact. Currently, it's a scientific fact.
Currently, no current.
Yeah.
Science changes every Monday and Tuesday.
Because we're in a simulation.
Yeah.
So currently listen, if the Big Bang was disproven, that would be a huge problem for the Torah. That would be a disproof for the Torah. At least for the Zohar. That would prove the Zohar wrong, because the Zohar says that we came from an explosion of light. Literally, that's the language of the Zohar. It's
beginning of light.
it said it pashtuta the nikuda chad, the expansion of a right. And if you ask, you know what the Big Bang is actually called? Big Bang was Fred Hoyle used the term Big Bang to say like it's silly. Oh, they believe in a Big Bang, but it's a derogatory term. The name of the theory is inflation, a fast expansion. It pashtuta, literally. It's the opposite of tzimtzum. It's the opposite of contraction. It's super expansion, hyper expansion.
But that doesn't
That's it.
necessarily mean it has to do with
It was not literally an explosion. It wasn't a bang. There was no bang. It's an inflation. That's what I'm saying. The word Big Bang is a derogatory term. We just use that colloquially. There was no bang. There's nothing to explode. It's not an explosion. There was no fire. There was no. It's an expansion.
But science believes that there was an actual bang.
No, it does not believe that. There was no bang.
I've seen documentaries that show that.
They say the word bang. Like, what do you mean bang?
Well, and they show it. You ever seen a bomb go off?
Right. It's
That's
not
what they
that.
show you.
No,
There's
it's
science
not that.
that says-
There's no fire. There's no oxygen. There's no sound. There's no bang. Right? It's just that's the colloquial term. That's all. Okay? All right. Simulation theory can also explain that, why the universe is so perfectly mathematical, perfectly numerological. It can also explain many, many, many other things. I'm not going to go through all of them. One that I particularly like, speaking as a biologist, one of the big mysteries in biology has always been, why do we sleep? Sleeping makes no sense. Like, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes no sense that you have to shut yourself down for like a third of your life, that you sleep for, let's say, 8 hours if you're lucky, or you sleep 8 hours out of 24 every night for your whole life. You're completely like unconscious. You have made yourself completely vulnerable. How is that a survival advantage? There's no survival in that. You've just made yourself available to be consumed with no defense. You're completely defenseless and vulnerable for a third of your life. That makes no sense from an evolutionary perspective. What's the adaptive benefit there? You would think that evolution should have gotten rid of sleep a long time ago. Sleep makes no sense.
Aren't you rejuvenating? I mean, that's the healing. You need to sleep in order to heal.
Good. Why is sleep so rejuvenating? Why is sleep so important that if you don't sleep, you are completely, out of commission, you can't function. And if you don't sleep long enough, it's actually fatal. Not sleeping long enough could become fatal. Why is sleeping so important and so vital biologically?
You're plugging yourself in.
So biologically, it says that your muscles during the day, there's something comes on top. I don't remember.
What if I don't move?
Chemical.
I don't touch my mind. I just sit all day, watch TV. I still need to sleep. Muscles or no muscles. The best theory for sleep right now is sleep is for your brain, for your mind, to consolidate all of its information, to categorize everything that you absorbed over the course of the day. And it's similar to what we call in computers, what's basically would be a defragmentation, right? It's like a defrag, right? The hard drive needs to clean itself up. It needs to rearrange all the information, make more space. If you don't defrag every so often, if the hard drive doesn't defrag, it's going to get clogged and become very inefficient, and then it's not going to function properly. Just like a human that doesn't sleep for a while. You start to not function well. Your hard drive disks aren't working so good, right? So sleep seems to be very similar to a hard drive defrag. It's very similar to a computer. Very interesting. So that could be an explanation for why you need to sleep also, right? And your brain is quite active when you are sleeping. It's rearranging information, consolidating information, putting things in the right places. Right now, I think, in the interest of time, it's enough to move on. What simulation theory implies, there's a few clear conclusions that come out of simulation theory. Number one, if we're in a simulation, then obviously there must be a creator to this simulation. I think that's a pretty fair and obvious conclusion. Somebody must have created this VR game that we are in. That's number one. Number two is, if we are in a VR simulation, then just like any computer, video game, whatever, then all audio and video and everything that's happening is being recorded somewhere. It's all being tracked and recorded. Everything is somewhere in a data center somewhere. And you could, like a computer game, theoretically call up any moment in the game, see what happened at that moment or in this moment, right? You can replay any sequence of the game, Everything is being recorded. There's a record of everything. That's point number two. Point number three is that this world is not real and that there is some other real world. That this world isn't real, but there is another world that is real. Amazingly, those same three conclusions are three fundamental principles of Jewish belief and what the Torah has been telling us for millennia. That number one, there's a creator. That number two, the creator sees everything, hears everything, everything's recorded. Any moment of your life could be replayed. And number three, that this world isn't real. That this is just a transition world. The real world is somewhere else, right? The Olam HaEmet is a different world. That this world is an illusory world. We read in Pirkei Avot, I'm just going to throw a few verses just to reinforce it. We read in Pirkei Avot, Istakel b'shlosha dvarim v'yeh haba li'yedei avera. You've heard this before. You need to keep in mind always three things. Pirkei Avot says, Ain ro'ah ve'ozen shoma'at ve'chol ma'asecha b'sefer nichtavim. Right? That everything that is you are doing, everything's being recorded. There's an eye watching everything. There's an ear listening to everything. And everything you do is being recorded. Everything is in a data center somewhere. It's all being stored. Just like, it's all in the cloud somewhere. Just like today, young people put silly things on social media and it never goes away, right? Once it's on social media, somebody can pull it up and that's it. And the same Pirkei Avot tells us, Rabbi Yaakov Omer, "Ha'olam hazeh domeh lifros dor b'fnei olam haba." This world is just a hallway. This isn't the real world, right? Atken atzmecha b'pros dor kedei shetikanes letarklin. The real world, the banquet hall, is somewhere else. This is just the hallway. This is just the passageway into the banquet hall. The real party is somewhere else. You're not in the real party right now. You're just in the doorway. You're just in the hallway. You're just on the passage to the real banquet hall where the real party is. This world isn't real. This is just a transient, illusory world. And the Tikkunei Zohar is beautiful. Tikkunei Zohar, is a portion of the Zohar. It was actually published for the first time before the rest of the Zohar. It was actually published first. And it's a commentary on the first word of the Torah, just on the word Bereshit. It's a fascinating book. Sefaria now has an English translation, so everybody can study it. Pretty complicated. But Tikkunei Zohar basically gives you 70 chapters, 70 explanations on just really stemming from the first word of the Torah, just from Bereshit. And one of those explanations right at the beginning is Bereshit is an anagram, the same letters rearranged, to Rosh Bait, which is, and it goes on to say, Raza de Mila, this is the secret of the verse of what King Solomon said in Proverbs and Mishlei, Bechochma yibane bait. Okay, what does that mean? So, Tikkunei Zohar says, Bereshit means Rosh Bait. If you rearrange the letters, it means, Rosh means head, Bait means house. Bereshit, all of creation, this whole house that God created, is in God's head. Rosh Bait. And that's the secret of what King Solomon said, Bechochma yibane bait. With wisdom, God created, or with wisdom one builds a house. That's literally what it means. With wisdom one builds a house. But the deeper meaning there is, what does that mean, Bechochma yibane bait? It literally means in. Bechochma means in Chochma, in wisdom. It's like God created this whole cosmos in Chochmah, in wisdom, in information. Chochmah is information. Chochmah, the sages say, is koach ma, the power of what? Chochmah is just information. Somebody who knows a lot is a chacham, right? A chacham is somebody who knows a lot. Lots of information in his head, big hard drive. And the Tikkunei Zohar is saying this whole creation, Bereshit, it's all chokhmah, it's all information. That's all. This whole cosmos, this whole house, God's house, it's all in chokhmah. It's all just digital. It's all information. It's Rosh Bait. So it's an information. The only thing that really exists in this universe is information. That's the only currency here that matters. And really, we say this in our prayers every day. We probably miss it. We say it every day before we say Shema. When in the blessings before Shema, what do we say about creation? We say Uftuvo mechadesh, that God recreates bechol yom tamid, every day and constantly, always, every moment, Ma'aseh Bereshit. Ma'aseh Bereshit, creation, was not just once, whenever, at the beginning of time. No. Every day, God is recreating the cosmos every day. Bechol yom tamid Ma'aseh Bereshit. Every day, tamid, every moment, at every second, God is recreating the cosmos, Ma'aseh Bereshit. We say this every day in our prayers. You can say it 1,000,000 times and miss its significance. What it's saying is that God is regenerating the cosmos at every moment, as you would expect in a simulation, where you're generating images constantly every second. If the computer stops, the game's over. Right? It's constantly recreating the cosmos as if anew every moment. God is recreating the cosmos every moment. And so, There's only God's mind, ultimately. And what I love this, Max Planck, or Planck really, who's another one of the fathers of quantum physics, he said, quote, "As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." All that exists is mind. There's one mind that generates everything. We are in a matrix. And Erwin Schrödinger, who I quoted earlier, the other father of quantum physics, he said, quote, "Consciousness cannot be counted for in physical terms. For consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else. Quantum physics reveals a basic oneness of the universe. Multiplicity is only apparent. In truth, there is only one mind." Again, Erwin Schrödinger, not Jewish, nothing to do with Torah. This is the conclusion of science. There's only one mind. That's what Erwin Schrödinger said. One mind. That's what we say in the Shema, right? Hashem Echad. What does that mean, Hashem Echad? It doesn't mean, when we say the Shema, we say Hashem Echad, people think it means that there is one God. That's not what we're saying. We're saying literally God is one. Right? Not that there is one God. God is one. Everything is God. All there is God. That's what we say. It's straight in the Torah. Moshe said this, and we say it when we take out the Torah. What do we say? Ata horeita ledat, ki Hashem hu Elohim, ein od milvado. You should know that Hashem is God. Ein od milvado. There's nothing else. Nothing. He didn't say, Moses didn't say, there are no other gods. There's only one God and there are no other gods. What Moshe said was, you should know there's only God and nothing else. Ein od milvado. There's nothing other than God. It's just godliness. That's it. It's all one mind, one consciousness, one simulation. So this is where I wanted to bring up a Hasidic story. You know how there's Hasidim and there's non-Hasidim, right? So I'm not going to share the whole story. We don't have time for it. But in short, the conclusion of the story is like this. The non-Hasid is sitting and learning all day, learning Torah. You know, what is he really doing? He knows that he exists, and he's sitting learning all day, trying to find God and trying to understand God. And the Chassid is the exact opposite. He knows God exists, and he's sitting and learning and meditating all day to find out if he exists. Is it I know I exist and I'm looking for God, or I know that God exists and I'm just looking for myself? Who am I in this vast virtual reality?
How does the calculation of pi factor into simulation?
It's another constant. It's another perfect constant of nature, of creation. Just like the fine structure constant, just like 137. And then it's the gematria of one of God's names, right? Shaddai, God's name Shaddai, Shin Daled Yud is 314. So it's an amazing thing. It's another one of those perfect correspondences between science and Torah. In science, you have one of these important constants of nature, which is pi, 3.14, and so on. And in Torah as well, one of the names of God, the name that specifically God uses when he's talking about cycles, blessings, reproduction, fertility, the cycles of generations and things like that. You'll notice every time Shaddai is used has to do with cycles and circles and things like that. And that name happens to have the numerical value 314. Right? Shin Daled Yud, 314, 3.14. So, on the Kabbalistic note, in Kabbalah, we say the Kabbalists and Kabbalistic texts refer to God. There are many names of God, and one of the titles for God, particularly used in Kabbalistic texts, is Ein Sof. Ein Sof literally means the infinite one. So critics of Kabbalah who have no clue what Kabbalah is, they're not really critics of Kabbalah, they're just haters. But the haters out there say, Kabbalah is just like idolatry and they worship this other deity called Ein Sof. Like, obviously that's all nonsense. I think everybody in this room understands that. Ein Sof, the Torah has many names of God, and Ein Sof is just another description to try to understand God. Ein Sof literally means the infinite one. That's its literal meaning, that's all. It's referring to God, the one God, the God that is one. He is called Ein Sof, the infinite one. But there's this interesting Kabbalistic discussion, also Hasidic discussion, of that everything ultimately comes down to not just Ein Sof, but Ein. That this cosmos comes down to Ein, like nothingness. And that we are, you, the I, is Ani, right? In Hebrew, I is Ani. And nothingness is Ein. It's literally the same letters, again, rearranged. So there's this Kabbalistic meditation on the fact that the I, the Ani, comes out of nothing. Like I am almost nothing. I am Ein. Ani and Ein are just the same letters rearranged. I'm getting to that. That's also right. That's right. King David said, "Me'ayin yavo ezli," from where will my help come? It literally means from nothing my helper, God, will come, right? It's almost like same idea, that the ultimate source of everything is this nothingness. What does that mean, nothingness? It has to be something. I mean, all of creation, we say creation ex nihilo, right? Or creation ex nihilo, that there was creation out of nothing. But what does that mean, creation out of nothing? In a simulated world, it makes perfect sense. Because this simulation was created, mamaj, out of nothing. It's digital. It's not real. This is the world of Ayin, of really nothingness. And then your Ani is generated out of nothingness. Yeah. Right, Ameir Lishon Bat Ayin, yeah. But that's Bat Ayin. But it's the same, because Aleph and Ayin are interchangeable. That's right. That Or and O are also interchangeable, right? Skin, your visual appearance is your Or in Hebrew with an Ayin. Ayin Vav Resh is your skin. But the sages say, and we quoted this last time, Rabbi Meir says, Kutnot Or, garments of light, that you should switch the Ayin with an Aleph, with Aleph Vav Resh, which means light, that you're a being of light. Oh, you're a being of light. Well, that makes sense in a virtual world. What is the virtual world? You're just lights on a screen. Oh, I'm a being of light. It makes perfect sense now. Last week, being of light made no sense. This week, in a simulation, yeah. What is a simulation? Just light. Just an optical illusion. You're a being of light. Your Ayin Vav Reish, your skin, no. Rabbi Meir, and of course he's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir means the illuminator, the rabbi of light. Rabbi Meir says, no. Rabbi Meir says, it's Aleph Vav Reish, you're a being of light. Sure, why not? Why? Yeah, why not? Why limit God? Why not? Yeah. Could be. Now you're getting into multiverse. Why not? Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So Rabbi Yitzchak of Homil said exactly that. He said that, when you see in the Torah, one opinion is that Avraham, when Sarah passed away, Avraham married Keturah. One opinion is that she's Hagar. Another opinion is that she's not Hagar. She's a different woman. Well, which is it? It can't be both. What's the truth? Is she Hagar or is she not? And we say, well, Elu ve'elu divrei Elohim chaim. These are both words of the living God. What? How? Well, in a simulation, yeah, they're both happening. So Rav Yitzchak of Homil actually said this, one of those Hasidic masters, and Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg quotes, and that's where I got it from. He says, in one world, Avraham married a different woman named Keturah. In another world, no, he remarried Hagar.
What about this one?
In this world, that depends which world you're in. Yeah, so it's absolutely possible. You could have a multiverse. Why limit God? You can have multiple simulations at the same time. And that leads me really to my next point, that this is where simulation theory is where Judaism and science really come together. It actually explains scientifically a lot of principles of Judaism, a lot of things that we discussed recently, what we discussed last week about the relativity of time and time dilation and all that mind-boggling stuff. How can time dilation be a thing? I'm traveling at a different speed, time slows down for me, I come back, my daughter's older than I am suddenly. How does that make sense? In a simulation? Yeah, why not? Why can't it make sense? In a video game? No problem. It's just programming. Perfectly fine. So time relativity, and we saw how in Judaism, that's what we explored last week. Time is absolutely relative. We said how the Jewish calendar is always changing. The length of years are always changing very wildly. We didn't talk about this last week. I should have mentioned it. It slipped my mind. But even the hour in Judaism is changing, right? We have a shah zmanit. The length of an hour in Judaism is constantly changing. The length of an hour today and the length of an hour tomorrow is different over the course of the year. We have this strange way of dividing up time. We take all the daylight hours and divide them, and we divide them by 12. So in the summer, an hour is very long. It could be 80 minutes. In the winter, a daylight hour is very short. It could be, 50 minutes or whatever. And they switch. In the winter, a night hour is long. And so that actually changes our prayer times. Why didn't our sages just set exact prayer times? Like 7 a.m., say Shema, say Shachrit, 5 p.m. do Mincha, 10 p.m. do like Arvit. Just make it clear. This is the time. No, they didn't say it like that. They said, okay, in the first 3 hours of the day you do this, but keep in mind, the definition of a day constantly changes. The definition of 3 hours is constantly changing. So the time to say Shema in your morning prayers in the summer is completely different than it is in the winter. If you're in Israel, it's different than if you're in Toronto. Every time you travel, you have to have the little calendar with you or look it up. I'm always like on Chabad.org, Zmanim for this city, where I'm always creating a schedule for myself. It's constantly changed. So time in Judaism has always been very relative. There's no concrete exact time. The minutes change, the hours change, the years change. 1 year has 385 days, 1 year has 355 days, 1 year it's 384, 354. Sometimes Kislev has an extra day, sometimes it doesn't. What's going on? Yeah. Adar has an extra month. Cheshvan might have an extra day. Just make up your mind. Give me a concrete thing. Nope. Our sages wanted you to know that time is relative. There's no real concrete time. Time is just a construct. And that's what we devoted a whole hour to last week. Time isn't real. It sounded crazy, but if you're in a simulation, time's not real. It fits in perfectly to this. It also explains reincarnation. We know that reincarnation is a fact. It happens. Judaism has been speaking about reincarnation all the way back to the Tanakh for thousands of years. So, reincarnation is just you're replaying the game. That's exactly how it works in a simulation. How many times did you play Mario and not make that jump? 1,000 times, and you replay that level over and over and over again, right? Or you switch the game because that game's boring. I don't want to be Mario. Today I'm going to be Donkey Kong. Reincarnation, right? Now I'm a player in another body. Yesterday I was Mario. Today I'm Donkey Kong. Tomorrow I'm Mega Man. Isn't that reincarnation? Is that the same thing? You're playing, same player, different game.
Same consciousness.
Right, same consciousness, same player, just in a different avatar, reloaded in a different place, different world, different level. So reincarnation, perfect. Just play as a different character. Same player, different character, different avatar. Fits into that. It also explains the notion that we discussed in the past of cosmic shmitot and the cosmic jubilee. Remember that there's this idea that just like we have 7 days, 6 days of the week, a 7th day is Shabbat, 6 years, the 7th year is the Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and then the Torah says you have to do that 7 times. You have 49 years, and the 50th is a Jubilee, and Rabbeinu Bechaya and Sefer HaTmuna, and so many of our ancient sources say that really the way to understand this is that there's a cosmic Jubilee of 7,000 years of civilization. There's 6,000 years of civilization as we know it, a 7,000th year of rest and reward, a Sabbath, and then civilization restarts. God hits reset, it restarts again. You have another 7,000 years, and it keeps going. There's a cosmic Jubilee. We spoke about this many times, right? We're currently in the Hebrew year 5784. We are approaching the end of this 6,000-year period of civilization and transitioning to the millennium of Shabbat. And then what? And then we say, well, according to this idea of cosmic Shemitah, the cosmic Jubilee, you restart over. That sounded very mind-boggling, but in a simulation, what's the problem? You just hit replay, reset, start the game again. All right, let's see how it turns out this time. And it explains also what our sages say about how God created the world. What do they say? That the Zohar says this actually right at the beginning, based on a verse in Eov. Job said, Azra'a v'isapra achina v'gam chakra v'yomer le'adam. That was the verse. And the Zohar says that these 4 terms allude to the fact that God first created the Torah. He looked at it 4 times, and he uses these terms, Ra'a, Sapra, Achina, Chakara. He had a rough draft of the world, and then he edited it, and he debugged all the glitches in the system. He looked into it 4 times, fixed it up, and then hit launch. And then he brought the universe into existence. לקבל 4 זימנין, אינון דכתיב, so ראה, יספרה, הכינה גם חכה, ברא קודשא בריחו, מה דברא. God looked into the world, did this thing 4 times, where he looked at his master plan, his blueprint, the Torah, the code. He looked into it, he edited it, he researched it, whatever it is. He fixed it up, and then he launched it before he created the world. All right, that's what he did. And this is actually, the Zohar says, Ail arba tavin bekadmita dichtiv. This is why there were 4 words in Bereshit. How does the Torah start? Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim. The Zohar says, why are there 4 words before shamayim va'aretz? Before the actual creation. It's an allusion to these 4 times that God created his blueprint, looked at his blueprint. Before he even created anything, he encoded the cosmos. He generated the code first. He wrote the Torah first as a blueprint. He looked into it 4 times. That's Bereshit bara Elohim et, 4 words corresponding to those 4 times. And then you had Shamayim va'aretz. So he looked into the world 4 times. He looked into the Torah 4 times, right? And it says elsewhere in the Zohar that God was istakel ba beoraita ubara alma. That God looked into the Torah first. First he created the Torah. First he created the code. And then based on that code, that, again, perfect numerological gematria code, then he launched the world. So that's what the Zohar is saying, that God actually looked into the Torah 4 times. He checked his software before he launched it. Okay, pretty amazing. The last thing is, we're saying that this world is a video game. It implies, the creator is almost like playing this game or playing with us. We're the players. We have this free will. We're playing the game. But God is also the creator of the video game, is a part of the game in a way, right? It almost seems blasphemous to say this, that we're all in God's big cosmic video game. But actually, there are several verses in Tanakh where describing God as doing exactly that. It says in Tehillim, Yoshev b'shamayim Yitzchak. God is sitting in heaven playing, laughing. So it almost seems crazy. Like, what does that even mean? And I wanna come back. There's a few verses like that God is playing with Leviathan. Yatzarta lesachek bo, right? You created the Leviathan to play with him. What does that mean, right? How do we make sense of that? So I'll come back to that at the end if we have time to break down that psalm in particular, that God is sitting in heaven laughing or playing even. And it reminds of the story of Tanur Shel Achnai, the oven. Remember the oven of Achnai, the story of Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer. I want to devote a separate class to this, but in short, Rabbi Eliezer says a certain oven is kosher. The rabbis led by Rabbi Yehoshua say, no, it's not kosher. He says, yeah, but I'm right. And if I'm right, this miracle will happen, the tree will uproot itself, and it does. And the rabbis say, no, we don't bring proofs from trees. And Rabbi Eliezer says, well, if I'm right, the water, whatever it is, fountain will flow backwards, the river will flow backwards, and lo and behold, the river flows backwards. And the rabbis say, nah, we don't bring proofs from rivers flowing backwards. Come on. It's just a simulation anyways. What are you doing? This is an optical illusion. So he says, okay, if I'm right. Anyway, at the end it gets to the point where Rabbi Eliezer says, if I'm right, God's voice, like a voice from heaven, a bat kol will come and support me, and a heavenly voice resonates, God, almost like God's voice, the bat kol comes and says, why are you guys arguing with Rabbi Eliezer? Don't you know that he's always right? Eliezer ben Hurkanus, the great one, Rabbi Eliezer Gadol, why are you arguing with him? He's always right. So God came and said he's right. And Rabbi Yehoshua stood up, looked up to the heavens and said, what are you doing here? Right? Lo b'shamayim hi. Right? Rabbi Yehoshua said, you told us in the Torah, lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heaven. You gave it to us. That's it. It's over. Right? You have no say in this debate between sages. Lo b'shamayim hi. Crazy, right? Rabbi Yehoshua told God, see you later. Right? This is, don't get involved. Lo b'shamayim hi. And what happened after that? How does the story continue? It's amazing. The story continues that Rabbi Natan, who is another contemporary, Rabbi Natan then goes and meets Eliyahu Navi, of course, who never died, as we said last time, and went up to heaven. Rabbi Natan asks him, what happened? Like, how did God respond to that? When Rabbi Yehoshua said, Lo b'shamayim hi, like, don't get involved. What did God... and they overruled God, it seemed like, and ruled that oven should be not kosher, should be impure. That became the law. Right. So he asked Eliyahu, what did God say when the rabbis seemingly overruled him? And he said, Amar le, he said, Kach chayech ve'amar. God smiled or God laughed and said, Nitzchuni banai. My children have won. They've beat me, right? They beat me at my own game, right? So, Nitzchuni banai. So it's like we're playing a game with God. And that round, Rabbi Yoshua won. So I think it even fits into that story. And it also explains why the Sanhedrin, like in this case, can rule that something is impure or not kosher, even against the reality. Rabbi Eliezer said, no, this is fine. And they're saying, no, it isn't. And that, once they make that a thing, they rule that now becomes the reality. How is that possible? That's like a Jewish belief, that once the Sanhedrin decreed something, that now becomes law, that now becomes the reality. How is that possible? Well, it isn't a simulation. You've just changed the code, essentially. It's very easy to change the reality when you're in a simulated world. And a mass consciousness can very much have an effect on what's going on. Okay, let's tie things up and conclude. There's a whole bunch of things that I can list that simulation theory makes sense of, both from a Torah perspective and a scientific perspective, everything from near-death experiences, past lives, sixth senses, telepathy, and all these strange things, debooks, and all these exorcisms. And any of these things in a simulation become very possible, right? They're basically like glitches in the system. Something was, some file was copied into the wrong place. There was an error occurred somewhere. Somebody knows something they shouldn't know. Got information from somewhere else, access to another hard drive that they shouldn't have access to, whatever it is. It describes basically anything bizarre, out of the ordinary. It explains all these things, and it explains miracles for the same reason. Anything supernatural in a simulation is not supernatural, it's natural. Because in a video game, you can cheat. You plug in a cheat code, and you can make miracles, right? You can do things, right? Yeah, prophecy as well, right? Prophecy is drawing information about an event that'll happen later in the video game or whatever it is. So it explains so many other things. One of the things that it explains for me is the size of the cosmos, which has always been just unfathomable. The universe is estimated to be at least 93 billion light years wide. You think about that. It's impossible to even think about, but a light year is like 9.5 trillion kilometers. The speed of light is 300,000 kilometers per second. That's like going around the world, 8 times or something in a second. 300,000 kilometers a second. That's the speed of light. And going at that speed, 300,000 kilometers per second, for a year. Okay, think about how far that is. Now multiply that by 93 billion. 93 billion light years is the size of the cosmos. So if you're traveling at the speed of light, flying along 300,000 kilometers per second, it'll take you 93 billion years to go from one end of and it could even be bigger. I mean, that's the estimate. And it's and it's expanding. So it's like you'll never reach the end. It's basically infinite. It doesn't end. It's just an unfathomable number. How could it be so? And it's just like endless, whatever it is, stars and planets and supernova and all these bright lights and things. It's just like in a real world, it doesn't seem to even make sense. In a simulation, though, it makes perfect sense. It never ends. It's just this infinite loop of visual effects. It's just this optical illusion of infinity, right? Of this ever expanding, like you can never reach the end of it. I think simulation theory also answers that. For me personally, it's something that I could never wrap my mind around, about a universe that's so vast. And why have so many trillions and trillions and trillions of stars out there? Why have billions of galaxies? What is the point?
So what is the point?
That it's nothing. It's just an illusion. The game doesn't end. It's a loop. It's an endless loop. You can't reach the end. So I think it also explains that. And the last thing, this really needs a class of its own, but I don't want to do a class on this. So I'm just going to do it now, and then we're going to finish. Because a lot of people ask me a question that seems crazy at first, but maybe not so crazy, which is the world flat? People send me emails, are you a flat earther? I heard you're a flat earther. I'm not a flat earther. I'm definitely not a flat earther. But people ask for my opinion.
My nephew says yes.
Right, so this is for him. This is for your nephew. This is for your nephew and the ever-expanding flat earther community, which numbers many millions of people now. And I get emails quite regularly, actually, asking me for my opinion on whether the earth is flat. And I also get many emails from flat earthers who are sending me evidence that the earth is flat. And Mike and I discuss this very often, but in the past. And I took a deep dive into this. I mean, obviously, as a science teacher, I teach that the world is round, and here's many pieces of evidence of why the earth is spherical. And it's important to say that the Torah, like the rabbinic position on this is that the world is spherical. Okay, so if somebody is a rabbinic Jew or listens to the rabbinic, what the rabbis say, then you basically kind of have to go with a round earth because everybody says that the world is round. And the Rambam says the world is round. And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari, which is actually very old. The Kuzari is from the 11th century. So this is before Columbus. So there's this myth that Columbus proved that the world is round. It's actually not true. So in the Kuzari, Rabbi Yehuda Halevi says that he's actually describing things that seem to like regular people, to people who are unlearned, it seems like hard to believe. And he says one of these things is that the earth is a sphere. And he's saying that this is a scientific fact that people who are unlearned don't grasp. So he says, "Kasher tarchika machshava she'aretz kadurit." Like this is something that tarchika machshava, that like the average intellect seems like this doesn't make sense, but he's saying it's a scientific fact. And he even estimates the size of the earth. She'i chelek echad mi-166 me'igul hashemesh, that the earth is a really small fraction of the size of the sun. And he says that people like don't grasp, but this is a scientific fact that the earth is spherical. The Rambam says the earth is spherical in very similar language. He says this is something so obvious. The Zohar says Kol Yeshuva mitgalgala beigula kakadur. The Zohar says explicitly that the whole Yeshuv, the whole earth, mitgalgala beigula kakadur, is spinning like a ball. So, I mean, the rabbinic consensus is that the earth is a sphere. So, that, for what it's worth, that needs to be said. But there is this growing movement of flat earth. Like flat earth is making a comeback. Why is this becoming so popular? And I took a deep dive into it and like watched some of these flat earth documentaries. And listen, the reality is that some of them are they seem to be convincing. Now,
how about something really stupid? Like take a rocket ship, go out of the atmosphere. And
no, wait. Yeah, so that's what I want to address. So
something really stupid, you know?
Right, that's what I want to address because what I don't understand is, this is to me, aside from all the evidence, whatever, my question is, what the flat earth position is based on the understanding that all of NASA, all space travel, all satellites, it's all fake.
Right.
It's all deliberately fake to fool you. So Elon Musk is lying to you, SpaceX isn't real.
And all these flat earthers
Yeah.
are all like...
Right. That's what I'm saying. So that's what I don't understand. That's what I ask every flat earther, which is what is the motive to lie to people? Like Israel and Iran hate each other, but yet they both agree, like they both lie to the world that they have intercontinental ballistic missiles and spy satellites. They agree to lie to the world, to each other's citizens that they have this technology. But somehow all these countries hate each other and fight each other, but they all agree to lie to their people about space technology, right? And Donald Trump started the Space Force. That's got to be a lie. Like everything, it's all got to be a lie. So I don't understand. What is the motive to lie to people? I don't get it. To me, that's the question that I ask every flat earther, and I've never gotten a good response of why waste trillions and trillions of dollars and involve thousands and thousands of people and billionaires and politicians and organizations. And it doesn't make sense. But there are ancient Jewish texts and other texts that do speak of the earth as being flat. And there are rabbinic statements in ancient texts, in Talmud and elsewhere, that seem to imply maybe a flat, like a description. They use flat-like language. And practically speaking, it does seem like when you're looking out at the world, it does seem to be pretty flat. If you're flying in an airplane, although you're not very far from the surface, don't really see much curvature when you look out the window. Felix Baumgartner did that whole skydive from the edge of space. And even with his fisheye lens camera, which curves the edges, still, you don't see much curvature. So this is what I think. I think simulation theory can also satisfy all of this. And I'll tell you why. Because as a kid, I remember playing those strategy games, and you have a map laid out in front of you. And I don't remember which game this was. Maybe it was one of the civilizations or whatever. Somebody on the internet will remind me. But when you're playing these strategy games, with your mouse scroller wheel, you can zoom into and out of whatever you're building, the city or whatever. When you're playing the strategy game, it's very flat, right? The map is laid out very flat in front of you, and that makes it very easy to play the game. But if you want to zoom in and zoom out, when you zoom out, eventually there's this cool simulation effect where it's flat, and then when you zoom in far enough, it just goes whoop, and it warps into a sphere, and then it looks spherical. So if we're in a simulation, there's no reason why the world cannot appear for me flat, and when I zoom out, if I go to space, it actually becomes spherical. It's because anyways, it's all an optical illusion. Anyways, it's all virtual. So why can't it be both? The world is certainly spherical. There's no doubt about that. I do not believe for a second that everybody is lying to you, all the governments and all these businesses and the corporations and all the military people. Like, they're all lying. I don't believe for a second that this is some giant conspiracy. I go with the Zohar and the Rambam and the Kuzari and everybody else who clearly say that the earth is a sphere. But then there are other sources that describe the world as being flat-like. So how can we reconcile all these opinions? It could very well be. In a simulation, both are possible. Anyway, I think simulation theory is eloquent, and it explains so much, both from a Torah perspective and from a science perspective. And just to summarize, it can tell us why the universe is so precisely mathematical and numerical and formulaic, and why the Torah is so perfectly mathematical and numerical, and God is described as being mathematically precise, acting midah keneged midah, perfectly measure for measure. In a computer program, that's very easy to program karma into the system, where things can be mathematically precise, measure for measure. So I think it can explain all of that. It can explain why matter is empty. It can explain the observer effect and why things only pop into existence when we seem to look at them. It can explain why time is relative, why space is so funky, and why we can warp and manipulate both. It can explain why the universe is so unfathomably large, inexplicably large. It can explain reincarnation and extra senses and all these strange glitches in nature and deja vus. We get deja vus sometimes. It can explain that. It can explain why we need to sleep. It can explain prophecy. It can explain extra sense. It can all these things. Maybe even the shape of the earth, which is, I think it's round, but maybe it could even explain to a flat earther how it could be both. And it can explain things from the Torah, like miracles, like souls. What is a soul? Right? It's just programming. The body isn't real. Like our sages always said, this world isn't real. It's an illusory world. And it implies all these things that the Torah has always said, that everything you do is recorded, there's a record of everything, and that there is a creator ultimately, that there is a creator running this simulation. So to conclude, what does it mean for us? What can we practically derive from this? Not that, it's a simulation, so I don't have to do anything or worry about anything or whatever. No, you still have to play the game, and the game still has rules. And so you still have to play the best game you can and succeed in this game and win the game. You don't want to be miserable. You don't want to suffer. It could be a really bad game, a miserable game, or it could be a really good game that you're going to enjoy. And remember that in the game, winning the game isn't the prize. And, we've all felt this before. When the game ends, you won, you feel good for like 1 second, and then you're like, oh, damn, the game's over, right? And then there's this, it's bittersweet, because you want to keep playing. If you're playing a good game, you want to keep playing. You don't want the game to end. So the prize is really the game itself. That's what you really enjoy. You enjoy playing the game. You don't want the game to end when it's a good game. So it's not about the end, and I think that's another reason why the Torah never speaks about the end. The Torah has no mention of the afterlife. We've mentioned this many times. The Torah is all about the here and now. And in the Torah, reward and punishment is here. It's in this world. The Torah wants you to focus on this world. It wants you to focus on playing the game. Play the best possible game you can. Use the Creator as your tool to help you win the game, to play the best possible game. It does also tell you that, if this world is an illusion, which we know it is, our sages already told us it's an illusion, it is a simulation, take it easy. Right? Don't be so stressed about everything. There's no reason to be so depressed and anxious and worried. Don't worry. You don't need to worry about whatever it is. You don't have to worry about eternal damnation. We spoke about this before. Make the most out of your life. Don't forget, again, the game still has rules. There's karma built into it. Midah keneged midah, measure for measure, is still built into it. You do bad things, you get bad things, will come your way. You're not going to win. All right, if you play that, you got to play Mario. All right, Mario, you got to be a perfect citizen. You got to be the plumber that's saving the princess. You can't be Bowser. You're going to lose that way. So I was going to go into Psalm 2, which goes into God playing, but maybe we'll save that for another time. You can look into it yourself. I think it has a lot to do with actually the forthcoming messianic age, and what does it really mean to be Mashiach? Because Psalm 2 is actually all about Mashiach. Psalm 2 starts by saying, Lama rakshu goim uleomim yegu rik, why do all the nations assemble in vain? Yityatzvu malchei eretz veroznim nosdo yachad al Hashem v'al Mashicho, that they are plotting and conspiring against God and against His Messiah. And it's in the context of that it says Yoshev b'shamayim yischak, that God sits in heaven and laughs. So if you actually think about that, again, we can devote an entire class to this maybe another time, of understanding this psalm properly, because I find that it's actually kind of mistranslated usually. If you really read it, you can read it in the sense of Mashiach coming and freeing people from the shackles of this illusory world, right? And leading people into a world of truth. So don't feel trapped and enslaved by the game, but take advantage of the game, and don't forget that it is a game. So you could manipulate it. If you align yourself with the Creator, you tap into the power of the Creator, you could manipulate it. That's the power of emunah. That's the power of faith. Tzaddik be'emunato yichyeh. The sages say that the tzaddik could, with his faith, recreate whole worlds. And the whole world was made for you ultimately. So what I want to finish is with what was brought up earlier. It says, first of all, in Pirkei Avot, to align your will, aser ratzono kirtzoncha, align your will with God's will, with the will of the Creator, kidei sheyaser ratzoncha kirtzono. And that way, He will do your will as if it's His will. You do His will as if it's your will. He'll do your will as if it's His will. Batel ratzoncha mipnei ratzono. And if you can nullify your will to do the right thing, to do God's will, and then what He will do in turn is ivatel ratzon acherim mipnei ratzoncha, that He will then nullify the wills of others to do your will. And so the world becomes your playground, essentially. And Hillel really summarized this, because Hillel said, Tanya amru alav al Hillel hazaken, k'shaya sameach besimchat bet hashoeva, when Hillel was partying at the greatest party of the year in temple times, the water drawing ceremony, which was the happiest time of the year in temple times, and he was at that party in the temple, he would say, Amar ken, imanikan hakol kan. If I'm here, everything is here. That's what Hillel said. Is that not the same thing, the observer? Like, you are creating your whole reality. You're observing your whole reality into existence. If I'm here, everything is here. Right? Imanikan hakol kan. Ve'im eini kan, and if I'm not here, mikan, nothing's here, right? If I'm not here, if I'm not observing, there's nothing going on, right? When I'm not looking at the moon, it might as well not be there, right? Where I am, everything is. Where I'm not, nothing is. Right? It's the same statement. And he continues and he says, Makom she'ani oev, what I love, a place that I love, sham raglai molichot oti. That's where my legs take me. That's where the cosmos take. That's where I am led, right? What I think, what I love, that's where I'm going. Right? You're recreating your reality as you go. As you walk through this world, you are recreating your reality. So, create the best possible reality. Because our sages say in another place, Kol echad ve'echad chayav lomar, every single person has to say to themselves all the time. What do you have to remind yourself every day, all the time? The Talmud says in Sanhedrin, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. Right? The whole cosmos exists for me. The whole world was created just for you. The world is your playground. The world is your video game. So play this video game. Play it as best as you can. Be the best you can be. Be that tzaddik that lives in his faith and that aligns with God's will, that can tap into the power of the Creator, because that's where all the cheat codes are, and the miracles and the supernatural powers. That's where if you can tap into that, you can do anything. You can manipulate your reality at will and live that perfect world. Where you are, everything will be for you. Imanikan kolkan. Everything will work out for you. So tap into that power. That's my message. Free yourself from the shackles of this alma deshikra, of this illusory world, and just live life. Enjoy the game. Okay, we'll end with that.
Sorry, Lord.
Kaya.